On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
If doing whatever it is that you did led to some sort of success, maybe it wasn't as high as you thought it was going to be, but there was still, it moved the needle in your life. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that again. Don't do it exactly like that again. Take what you learned from it, right? Refine your process, refine your vision and how you're viewing certain things, and then do it again.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in. What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, your host, Gathering the Kings podcast. Today, I've got Seth Teagle on the King stage. Seth, how are you, man?
Oh, doing great. I'll be on the show with you this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We were just talking off air about it's Monday morning as we're recording this, and we just got our kiddos off to the bus for you and out the door for me. Give them a swift kick in the hiney out the door. Not really. Fed them well. Spent some time with them. But man, we're in the same stage of life, building businesses, and got young kiddos. What kind of business are you in, Seth?
So primarily we do real estate, we do development and syndication. So we kind of have an investment firm that helps other people invest in real estate that maybe don't want to do it directly. And then, we started developing last year or so.
That's incredible. What kind of developments are you a part of?
Mainly we do apartments. We've got some mixed use, but we've got one going on right now that's kind of a condo apartment and some residential stuff. And we're doing all the entitlements and kind of horizontal construction on that. We'll sell that part off, but strictly, 99% of our stuff is all commercial.
Yeah, that's great. We've had several other guests on the show that are in the same space. So that's fantastic. I'm sure we'll get to some great conversation. Before we get into your story, entrepreneurialism, Lane, let's talk about why you're here. Like in general, big picture, you're still fighting, you're still pushing, you've got young kiddos. Like, what makes you tick? Why are you doing this? You've had some success already.
Yeah. That's really, I think the big thing is, everybody has to figure out what their why is. I know that I feel like it's kind of overstated, but for me, it started in 2012. And when my daughter was born, and I realized that there wasn't enough hours in the day for me to work to provide the life that I wanted to for her,
Right.
and that's when I started looking into what else could I do that would monetize my time better at a higher level than just being paid hourly. And, really the year that I got involved in, it happened to be real estate, but in business and kind of branching out on my own was that I had worked 1,000 hours of overtime that year. And, my normal schedule, I was a firefighter paramedic. The normal schedule I had the firehouse plus all the overtime was the equivalent of me being gone for 6 months, day and night, like a deployment. And,
Right.
it was really just wearing on the marriage, on having the kids, on everything. So that was the why that got me started, but it's also the why that drives me is to have time freedom so that I can spend it with the family.
Yeah. And I guess I love how you tied those things together because a lot of people say freedom, right? Like freedom of choice, whether that's time, money, effort, whatever we're choosing, I guess. But for you specifically, it's, hey man, I've got some really special things going on in my life, my marriage, my kids, and I want to make sure that I'm not only just providing for them, but being able to be with them when they're enjoying these things that I'm providing. And I think that that's like another level of, like as a warrior, as a man, we go out and we fight for these things, but then we realize eventually that we're like, they're enjoying it and we're busy.
Yeah. Yep. And
tell me about that morning or that day, that flash in your head where you're like, dang, they're over there, I'm over here. That 6-month deployment realization. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I think, it really came down to the fact, it's interesting. So one specific experience, I remember my wife and I fighting about money and fighting about just everything that was going on because, up until you start having kids, like you think everything's great. It's only the two of you. And as soon as you start introducing kids and diapers and baby formula and all the other things that come along with it and inflation, and I can't imagine doing it now, right? What we were doing, especially when we had twins. So I've got a daughter and then we had twins shortly thereafter that. just the amount of diapers that we were buying a month, and how much it eats into your income. And at the time, all I knew was to put my head down, work harder, work longer. And not only was I missing things because our schedule at the firehouse was 24 on, 48 off. So, I mean, I'm every third day forever, I'm working. There's all kinds of birthdays, holidays, all those things I'm missing. But then I'm also compounding that with being gone to work overtime because the only thing I was specialized in or trained in was to be a firefighter, be a paramedic. So if I wasn't at my firehouse working or working overtime, I had a second job, which most firemen do, and I would
Yep.
go to another firehouse and work. And so it's aware on your body, aware on your brain, aware on the stressors on the family. Firemen are like the number one killer of firemen now is suicide. The number one, the divorce rate for firefighters or first responders in general is way higher than it is for the normal population. And a lot of that is
Yeah.
because, like you said, not only does the job do you harm, but you're also gone all the time. And, it didn't affect me in my 20s, right? It was great. I'm the greatest job in the world. I loved it. But as I started getting older, I started having kids, my dad was gone a lot when I was growing up and missed a lot of things like that. And so I never wanted to have that for my kids, but my hands were tied. I didn't know what to
Yeah.
do. Like I said, putting your head down and
Change
working
that.
harder, it worked for a little while, but it was not going to be the long-term answer.
Yeah, and I think that that's where a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves is like in that stuck of like, "Ah," and so they start a business or start real estate investing or whatever, which is great. But at the beginning, or at least for a while at the beginning, it throws us in even further into working more, being gone more. And I'm okay with that. Like, I think that there's a period of time, we're breaking down the stages an entrepreneur's life, and the warrior stage precedes the king stage every single time. And
Yep.
that's you got to go to battle. You got to fight for it. You got to work. You got to put your head down so that there can be systems and teams and investments, compounding interest, all these words that we can use that eventually, when you get to the king stage, start paying off. But I think that you have to have that realization somewhere in the warrior stage of what you're just talking about. Like, I can't do this forever. And if you never have that, then you're just like always stuck there, never thinking about passive income or building something bigger than yourself or legacy for your kids or whatever it might be. You want to add anything there before we
Well, I
move
would
on?
just say that I think you're exactly right, but you have like as an entrepreneur or a business owner, it makes sense in that warrior stage because you're building something, right? If
Right.
you're just stuck in that warrior stage forever because you're at a job that maybe you love, maybe you don't love, but the value of your time is being determined by somebody else. And so you may be going through that warrior phase like I was, but there's no end in sight. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's forever. And I think that's what really wears people out or wears marriages
Yeah.
out or wears families out, where at least even for me now, right? When I bought my first property, I worked 12-hour days. I went from the firehouse, left there at 7 a.m. in the morning, drove to the property, and I was working 12-hour days down there. And I
Right.
did that for, a year and a half. But I knew that if I executed that specific deal properly, it was going to change my life forever and my family's. And so, I think if you're, like you said, an entrepreneur building a business, that, hey, if I grind it out for the first couple of years, at some point you're going to get big enough where it's going to take off where you can hire some people, you can get some
Right.
help. And so there's light at the end of the tunnel. But, like I said, for me, I was grinding it out at the firehouse and you're doing a 25-year term.
There's no light.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exactly. So it's a little bit different, if you're in that, but that's why, like I said, why I do what I like this, us talking about this today. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so funny that it seems so easy in your conversation of like, well, if you're an entrepreneur, then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You have something to work for. But how many entrepreneurs are listening today who, by their own choice, have kept themselves right there? They've kept themselves small. They haven't hired out. They haven't created the systems. They just basically now own their own job,
Yep.
which again, there's a moment in time for that. I had that. You just
Yep.
described that period of time where you had that. But if it always stays the same, it's no different than working at the firehouse for
Yep.
20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yep. 100%.
Let's talk about your story, how you got into this. Obviously, you said you were a firefighter. Give me the backdrop. Were you always an entrepreneur? Were you always thinking creative? How did you come to investing? Give us the backdrop.
Yeah, so I think that I was always an entrepreneur. I just didn't know it.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my brother and I laughed because we grew up in North Dakota. We played hockey. I mean, it's like breathing air in North Dakota, Minnesota, Canada, lower Canada area that we traveled in. And so, even back when we were kids, we would have to go out and sell candy bars for the hockey boosters. And I always remember he was always afraid to go and sell these candy, go door to door. So
Right.
I would always go sell all of mine, and then I'd come back and get his and go sell all of his too. And he would just kind of stand there in the on the sidewalk and watch. And I just
Yep.
loved it. I loved the interaction with people. My dad was a great salesman, and he
Nice.
was an entrepreneur for a while. And, I never, I just that's what was inside me talking to me, right? Even in the fire service, I did 22 years. I got promoted while I was there, but I was never like, I loved the job and I loved helping people, but I was never like, I always felt like there's more. I should be doing more. I wasn't using all of my talents, if you will, or,
Sure. Yeah.
but I was limited by what options were available to me. And it wasn't until I got into real estate and I really saw a path to entrepreneurship where I thought, man, I could really take all of my energy and put it into something that can not grow something for me, for my legacy, for my family.
Yeah.
And, once I realized that that was, they were kind of awoken that hunger, it was off to the races.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective of having it always been inside, but something changed, that woke that up. I think that we every entrepreneur listening can relate to that, right? We always have that moment or that jump that we took. Do you think that entrepreneurialism would have found you regardless? Maybe a lot of firemen go into the trades or was it specifically something about real estate that jumped out and was like, oh my goodness, this specifically is what I've always been thinking or dreaming or what was inside?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. So I mean, like you said, firemen, anybody that's a full-time career fireman, has a pretty, there's about 4 different schedules throughout the country that people keep, but mine was always 24 on, 40 off. And a lot of guys would have jobs in the trades. So they'd be roofers, concrete guys, bricklayers, whatever, floor installers. Like, they'd always have their little side gig, but it was always a side gig come to the actual real job of being a fireman. And for me, the real job just wasn't panning out anymore. Like, I still loved the job, but like I said, financially, my lifestyle and I mean, again, we were very conservative and try to do all the right things, but it was just outpacing my salary. And so it puts you in a rock and a hard place. And, it wasn't until, well, 2 things. I reconnected with a guy that I went to college with. I went in the fire service. He went into real estate. He became a realtor. And when I reconnected with him, he was a multimillionaire. He was doing hard money lending. He was into flipping. He was into some small multifamily stuff. And I reached out to him because I was like, Matt, how did you go from the guy that I knew, sharing an apartment in college, to this guy
Right.
who, like, again, $1 million to me back then just was like this pie in the sky number.
Yeah.
And he was like, you need to read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which, anybody that's a real estate person or even an entrepreneur in general, if you've
Yeah.
never read that book, you should read it. But it was the first time that my eyes had been opened to the difference of assets and liabilities, and buying something or putting money towards something that in turn pays me. I had never really heard that before. And,
Yeah.
I had filled out the personal financial statements if you're going to get a car loan or whatever. And I was always kind of like, what? I didn't know, like, it was like a foreign language.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
but that was it. I mean, I saw the success that he had. I knew that he was a normal guy, and he pointed me into that book. Then after that, he told me to go like a local meetup and meet other people that were already farther ahead of me in that arena, and then get a mentor. And that's exactly what I did. And, I realized that the sky was the limit. And when I kind of got to the end of those 3 things and I kind of teamed up with a guy to work with for a year, I realized the sky was the limit. As much as I wanted to work, as hard as I wanted to work, I had a true path to legacy wealth, to financial freedom. Like, that was the real thing. Dave Ramsey wasn't the answer to just continue to cut back and save and all these different, I tried all that
Right.
and it never worked. So, that was kind of, I think, the pivotal moment for me was, it happened to be real estate, but to me, it was like I needed the sure guarantee, and real estate creates more millionaires than anything else in the country.
Yeah. I think you have such a unique opportunity to have belief and really you seeing your buddy, right? Because you saw him as a regular guy. You shared the apartment together. You saw how he didn't clean or skip brushing his teeth or whatever. Like, he was a real person to you who wasn't successful then, and then became successful. And so what that did inside of you is like, well, geez, if he can do it, I can do it, which is belief.
Yep.
And if you have belief, man, like you said, sky's the limit. If I genuinely think that something is beyond me, then there's no chance I'm going to go after it. I'm not going to take any action towards it. I'm dead. But that's exactly what he did for you. He blew off the cap of what's possible and kind of gave you a couple of pointers there. I love what you said, that you were coachable. He said, go do these 3 things. And you said, when I went and did these 3 things, basically the sky was a limit. And it's like, wow, well, first off, how many people do you and I both know in our own circles who probably should reach out and say, hey, dude, I knew you in high school or I knew you wherever. And wow, you've become extremely successful. How'd you do it? Right. But they never do. And then the second time, if they do, how many times have you and I gotten on a quick call and said X, Y, or Z? And then they just don't. Right. So my encouragement to the listener through all of this is that you're here, you're listening. You've chosen to say, I need some help. You're here listening today. You made the phone call, per se. You're here on the podcast. And so what Seth has given to you right now is you have to be able to figure out some things. He just gave you 3 steps to be able to blow off belief and then be able to have some steps that you can actually go, take into action in your specific industry. Regardless of the industry, though, mentorship, belief, all these things that you were just talking about can 100% apply. Would you like to add anything to that specifically?
No, I think that's it. I mean, whatever industry you're in, find somebody that's in that industry doing better than you or farther down the road than you are and connect with them. Because I mean, I do it today. I just got back from an event over the weekend, where you're connecting with other people that are farther down the road than you because there's so many things you can learn from them. And if nothing else, you're just getting inspired. You sit
Yep.
down with somebody that's, if you're a car wash owner and you got one car wash, let's say, or you're whatever your business is, your e-commerce or whatever, and you go and meet with other people that are doing, you're doing 100,000, they're doing 1,000,000, or you're doing 500,000 and they're doing 5 million, whatever it is, like go and talk to those people and realize how normal they are. But then ask them, like, how did you go from because they were at where you were at one point in time. And where's the breadcrumbs at, right?
Right.
How did they get from where you're at today to where they're at?
Yep.
There's usually a path that they took. And if you can learn what that path is and kind of and just re-implement it, I always say that success leaves breadcrumbs. And so you
Yep.
just got to be looking, and you got to be hungry. You got to track down those people and do whatever it takes to get in the room with them and you'll be successful.
Yeah. Do you find, or have you found maybe at this stage in the game, first off, I agree with everything you just said, seeking out that individual or people who are in your industry, they can give you specifics. I remember when I purchased my first couple of edible arrangements franchises, I did the same thing. Called up corporate and was like, okay, who are the top dogs? Right. And I just started calling. Hey, this is who I am. This is my situation. I'm new. I'm 24 years old. Tell me how you run your Valentine's Day. Tell me how you do this. Tell me how, and just start taking notes. Right. But eventually, what I have found, and maybe you'll agree, is that once you get the X's and the O's down, right? The how do you actually go find the deal, or in edible arrangements, how do you either dip the fruit or how do you organize the team?
Mhm.
Beyond that, then it was building a business or building wealth or building
Yep.
a legacy. Like it's another level, which isn't necessarily industry specific. Would you agree with that? And what would you suggest that anybody listening would do in that case?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. For me, it was like, okay, I got the first deal done. Great. Now I want to do another one. Or like you got your first franchise done and then you want to go out and get another one because you recognize the fact that, man, this first one was successful. Look what it's doing. If I can go do this 10 more times, but your ability to scale comes down to the team. And I always tell people, if you want to be in control, then you're going to stay small. But if you want to grow, you've got to let go of that control. And I think that plugging in key players, and there's always growing pains and there's
100%.
always fears and like, I can't really afford this person right now. Like for us, there's parts of our business where I make zero money on the everything gets reinvested. It gets reinvested in the team, in salaries, in bringing the right players. But hiring the A players always makes us money, and hiring the C players or who maybe we can afford at the time, I feel like always has costed us money. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I for me, if I was you and I'm doing edible arrangements or something similar to that, I'm going to go and like bug the somebody in my local area. Maybe if you're starting one and there's somebody else in another city over or state over that has got 10,
Right.
I will do whatever I have to do to get in the room with that person and bug them enough because it's at some point they're going to share with you. And I think that is, how did you build out your team or getting with people that like I go to masterminds. So I pay to go to events where I was just in one with a room of 200 entrepreneurs and not everybody in there is doing what I'm doing, but there's a lot of people in there that are either farther ahead than me or maybe doing things just a little bit differently. And
Yep.
being in those rooms and talking with some of those folks, it just allows you to see things from a different lens. And I think that sometimes, when we're working in our business or like it was one of the guys said this weekend, if you're in the picture, you can't see the frame.
Right.
And we get in the weeds sometimes and we can't see the best path. And so you just, like, so getting in rooms with other folks that are not, obviously if you're if you're doing edible arrangements and you go to a guy that's in the same market as you, he may not want to share all the secrets, right? But
Right.
somebody who else is a successful business owner, like I attend a meetup, it's like kind of a club for entrepreneurs here locally, and there are, I mean, all kinds of different businesses, but
Yep.
building out systems is the same no matter what your business is.
That's right.
And I think that's the big thing is, again, for me has always been getting in the room with folks that are farther ahead than I am, real estate or not, and learning how they did it, asking advice, giving them, hey, here's the biggest pain points that I am having right now in my growth, and then listening to what they tell me, listening to what maybe their scenario was that they've overcome, that they've worked through, how they did it, how they, things they learned, and then reflecting on those things, and then implementing them into my growth strategy, I think has allowed us to explode with what we're doing.
Yeah, 100%. I'd agree. All right, let's talk about practically. Let's go into your story a little bit. I want to know of a good decision that you made when you can look back and go, okay, this one decision is something that I would repeat over and over and over again, and we can learn from it. What is it?
I think the one decision I made was to bet on myself. I mean, people, at least if I would have been scared or had analysis paralysis or been fearful of,
Right.
can I make it happen? I would have, you'd never be talking to me right now. I'd still be doing the same thing that I was doing. I'd probably be divorced. I'd probably be, in a completely different life path right now. But I knew, because of experiences I had as a kid, and because of that candy bar experience, because of other things that, my mom always called me scrappy, quote unquote. I knew that no matter what, once my decision was made on something, that I would grind it out, that I would dig in, that I would do whatever it took for that to be successful. And, I just knew, or bet, like I said, betting on myself, I did that. And I was like, kind of like they always say, burn the bridge. I had no backup plan. This was
I'm
it,
all in.
and had to be successful, right? So,
Yep.
that was, I think, trusting myself to know that I could do it no matter what came. I was going to push through and be successful. That was probably the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, and I think that we all have that inside of us to a degree, some stronger than others. And so for the guy listening right now that maybe he knows that he has that in him to like be scrappy, to go all in, to commit to himself, bet on himself, however you want to phrase that. But for some reason, maybe he hasn't yet. Or maybe he's just had the recognition that, man, maybe I haven't gone all in yet. Maybe I've just been kind of tiptoeing around this thing. And maybe that's why I'm not at the 7-figure mark yet. What would you say to that guy listening who isn't there yet? Or maybe he hasn't, he believes it's in there, but he hasn't tapped into it yet.
I think I would try to figure out, like, what do you believe you haven't? For me, it was obviously fear. I had, a good job. I was making six figures. I mean, I was doing well with all the overtime I was working and whatnot, and I couldn't just give that up, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't agree with the thought of, like, just burn the bridges, quit your W-2, like, go all in.
Right.
You have to have a plan, and I think that's the thing. I sat down and said, okay, here's where I'm at today. Here's where I want to be at in 3 years, or even 12 months, or whatever, and then what are the steps I need to take to get there? And like I said, for me, when I started attending real estate meetups and I started seeing all these other normal people and how well they were doing and what they were doing and the strategies they were using, it gave me confidence to think, man, all these are like normal folks. If they can do it, I can do it, like we talked about. And then
Yeah.
it was like, okay, well, how do I go? Like, I only had one chance to make it a successful. My first deal had to be a success. Otherwise, it would have bankrupt me or put me in an even worse position than I'm in today. So I went to a guy that was a general contractor in one of the meetings that I met. He was flipping houses, and I said, look, let's meet. So we met, we had coffee, and I just talked to him and I listened. And what I heard him say multiple times, he didn't come right out and say it, was that he was struggling. One of his pain points was that he needed a project manager that he could trust. And I thought, man, I'm working 24 hours, 2 days off. I've got a history of an experience with the building codes and fire codes and doing all these things. And I knew enough about the trades to know, if you're doing the correct work or if it was looking right. So I just offered him. I said, look, let me be a solution to you. I'll work for free. Like, just teach me what you know, like, on the downtime, but I'll run your projects and I'll manage some of your properties for you, because those were the biggest, like, headaches that he had. And
Yeah.
I did that for a year. I made no money. But the thing, the
Well, you
point
made a ton of money.
yeah, but the point being is that I got an education, right? And for me,
Yep.
I knew that I didn't want to just, like, oh, I heard the guy talking on a podcast about real estate. I went to a meetup. Now I'm going to go buy this house or this apartment building or whatever it is.
Right.
I had to have some kind of plan, and that was it. I basically went through training for a year, and all of it led to my very first deal I did. And from that deal, that one deal changed my life. So, that's what I would say is, again, it comes back to networking. It comes back to finding somebody that's a little bit farther ahead of you and asking for help. You don't know all the answers. Maybe you've been successful, but you keep hitting a glass ceiling
Yeah.
in your business or what you're doing. Like, to me, the best thing is to take a step back, get with other folks that maybe are not the same lane as you, but they're clearly successful in business or investing
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And then, ask their opinion. Take a look at this and see what I'm doing. And sometimes you may have to pay for that. I mean, that's the other thing is you can't be afraid of that. If you're going to somebody that's super successful, their time is money. They've got a ton of things going on in order to get their attention. I've always found if you solve a problem, you don't create more of a headache. You solve a problem for them, which I did for the gentleman that kind of trained me for a year, or you're willing to pay them. If their hourly rate, quote unquote, or their earning potential for an hour is $500, go give them, offer them $1,000 for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because in those 2 hours, if you get, 1, 2, maybe 3 nuggets that could change the path of your business or change the path of your growth, I mean, it's well worth it. Best money you've
Yeah.
ever spent.
Hey, Kings and Queens, Chaz Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you're dropping the nuggets for sure. Even right now, I want to encourage the listener just to pause and go back. It's stuff that we've heard before, right? Like, I don't think any entrepreneur hasn't heard this. Or if they haven't, then welcome. But I think that most people have heard this. The reality of it is that they've probably just haven't put it into action yet. So I want to encourage them to take what you're saying seriously, because they probably haven't found that person that they can go serve. They probably haven't called up and asked them questions. They've just been busy doing the business.
Yep.
And sometimes that's good, but it doesn't get us to the next level. What would you say? Let's flip the coin. Let's say a bad decision that you made, or maybe something that didn't work out so well that we can learn from as well.
I mean, I would say not knowing what you don't know. Like, I got my very first deal I got into, I knew I didn't know a lot, but I knew enough to be dangerous. And I realized I went in undercapitalized, and I recognized it fairly quickly. But again, I phoned a friend, another fireman that was in Cleveland that had got out of the fire service, was doing apartment buildings. And I called him and I'm just like, look, here's my scenario. What do I do? Like, I don't know. Like, I had to reach out for help, and he's like, you are undercapitalized. And he's like, you got to go raise private money. And, again, I think it's just another example of taking action. I asked for help. I listened to what the person said, and then I did what he told me to do. And that was, I think that any bad decision, it's only bad, or it's a bad decision or a mistake if you do it twice, and so sometimes we just find ourselves, especially in entrepreneurship, there's no clearly defined path. You're in the jungle kind of bushwhacking and cutting your way through. And sometimes you're the first person that's ever, been on this path, or at least in your world.
Sphere,
Exactly. You're the only one. Right. And like I said, so if you can find somebody else that's maybe been on a similar path and ask them, and then when they tell you, do what they tell you or listen, that's I don't know. I know I've said it probably a ton already, but that is by far the number one thing that has helped me grow to the size and the level that we're at today in the short amount of time that we've done it, is because I do exactly what I'm telling you. And that would probably be the biggest mistake, but it also came with a solution and actionable items. And I followed the path, and it led to success.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can delineate that same situation to any business listening today. There's been something that they jumped into quickly, maybe, or maybe not. But either way, once they got in, it was kind of like, and a lot of times it has to do with money.
Well, and it's always right. I mean, it's like the idea, like, it always sounds great, and then you get in it and you never realize like exactly how tough it is. And I don't know all of I heard a quote one time, or I don't remember what I was listening to, but they said there was like 5 phases of business where you think it's a great idea, then you jump in, and then like the third one, you're like trying to figure out like, oh my gosh, this is way more than I thought. And it's super,
Right.
You get almost like anxiety because you can't figure out how to get to where you want to go, but it's there. You just got to keep grinding every day. And a lot of days you don't feel like you're making any headway and you're not seeing anything change, but there's little things along the way that you are. And eventually, like in that 4th stage, you start to see the light. And then fifth is the success, and you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. But a lot of people give up on that third step.
Yeah. I talking about quotes that we've recently read and stuff. I heard one maybe yesterday, and it basically said something about like, I wish I wasn't as smart, because then I would have jumped in. I wouldn't have been smart enough to doubt myself, in essence, right? Like, sometimes we can be prepared, is what, some would say, and done all the analysis and realize that this was a maybe not a deal that maybe should have gotten into. But the problem is that it wouldn't have been your first deal, and you would have delayed, and you would have kept going, and maybe waiting and waiting and waiting, and maybe so much analysis paralysis, like you had mentioned earlier, that nothing ever actually gets done. You don't take the risk, you don't learn the lesson, and so then you kind of just hang it up and go, maybe it's not for me. Or we wait so long that it just never materializes into something that should have been. Like in stage 5 that you were just talking about, you look back and you go, oh man, even though that was difficult, it was worth it. And so there's like this blind, a little bit almost like a benefit that an entrepreneur has, where we jump in, not knowing everything, like what you said about the deal, a little bit half baked. And I'm pretty good at analyzing. I can run numbers. I can get in the weeds with the best of them. And I can tell you all the reasons we shouldn't do this. And so I find myself even at this stage in the game where, yes, I need to be maybe a little bit more particular about the investments that I'm making, or maybe a little bit more stringent about the buy box. But the reality of it is that I try to stay away from the perfectionist in me, because then it just keeps me from taking action. It keeps me from jumping in and going, oh, crap, now I got to figure it out, right? Because every time, like you said, I've jumped in and realized, even though maybe some of those have worked out, some of those haven't worked out, quote unquote, I'm doing the air quotes, I've still learned, which has then helped me in other areas of my life or other businesses or other investments, which has then eventually collectively moved me forward. Would you add anything to that?
No, 100%. I think that's really it, right? Is even as, maybe you jump in and you weren't as experienced and you get through something, but don't let those negative experiences or that grind like scare you to keep growing, because you shouldn't, I always hate when people like go through something, they're like, oh man, I'll never do that again. Well, if doing whatever it is that you did led to some sort of success, maybe it wasn't as high as you thought it was going to be, but it moved the needle in your life. Like, don't do that again. Don't do it exactly like that again. Take what you learned from it, right? Refine your process, refine your vision and how you're viewing certain things, and then do it again, right? I mean, for me, like, I learned a ton on my first real estate transaction, and I refined my process, and I jumped right into the second one. And in the second one, I learned even more things or better things, or maybe a little bit higher level. And it helped me to refine it again to where I did my third one. And one that we always are learning something. And there's always something that comes up. It's never like, the boat's always rocking. It's never smooth, right? There's periods of smooth, but like I said, when you're in those kind of tumultuous times, like, refine your process and make, as long as you're getting better every time, or your process is getting cleaner, it's getting more streamlined, you're writing things down. That's a big one, is documenting the process. So that way when you look back or you get to the next one, like I'm sure for you, like when you bought your first franchise, and then you went into your second one, you learned so much in your first one that you probably operated the second one a little bit different. And then your third one was even more different than that. And it's the same thing with everybody. I think that's what you should be doing. That just energizes me. I get so excited about talking like that stuff, because the worst thing you can do is look back and think, oh, I'll never do that again. And then and it stops you.
Yeah. 100%. I think it should be inspiring to each person, because whether that's in the trades, or whether it's in marketing, or whether it's in edible arrangements, or the investment deals that I've done, or the mastermind group, or the whatever it is that you and I or the listener are part of, there's always another level. I was talking about this with my wife last night. We were, we're working through like a marriage course and talking through stuff, which is really cool. Just another area of life that we're always trying to level up in,
Yeah.
And the question, it came down to just like her and I both being, we both critique not only ourselves, but each other, which obviously, can cause conflict. And, but the root of that, for me, at least for both of us, is we want to be better. We want to go to the next level, not only with each other, but individually in our businesses and as parents, as husband, wife, like all of that. And so I think that, to your point, how can you progress if you don't just jump and then learn? And I think that should fire you up, even though there's struggle. Even when I look back, I don't have 7 locations of edible arrangements anymore. I've moved on. I still have a few, but it's like, man, all those lessons that I learned in my 20s of putting together 60 plus employees in 3 states, it's like, whew,
Yeah.
We can talk about some struggle if you want to talk about some struggle,
Yeah.
Okay, I want to know that if you have a process, we're talking about decisions. So nowadays, kind of fast forward now, what process do you take yourself through in a decision? Is there a mindset? Are there, 7 steps to success? What's your process around decision making today?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going back. I mean, it's like kind of old school though, just pros and cons. We look at like what's the vision now, or what's the where are we at. I think we try to always figure out what's our long term goal. And I mean, again, I don't set up goals for like 5 years, 10 years, because things are just always shifting. We might have something kind of a umbrella goal for 5 years, but I mean, with things the way that are going right now, and especially in the real estate market, we're always maneuvering. But we try to figure out like what's one goal that solves all the other goals. We'll put, we'll do like a kind of like between Christmas and New Year's. So I'm kind of getting ready for it this year. I'll kind of lay out the plan for 2023 and maybe a little bit into 2024. But really beyond that, it's too far out to really know where we're going to be at, because where I'm at, the way that I always try to operate is where I'm today, I shouldn't be in the same place next year. So to say in 5 years we're going to be here, well, I mean, it's just too hard. So we do, 12 months. We do some, kind of obtainable goals. We break it down into quarterly. We do the annual stuff, but ultimately we try to say, okay, is there one goal that we can shoot for as a company, as a team, that will solve a lot of these other goals? And like that's the big one that we shoot for, because if we can get to that goal, all the other ones get solved. And we
Yeah.
kind of leave that one for last, right? Like what are the current, like the quarterly metrics, the KPIs that we set within the business, within the management company, within our construction company? Like what do those look like? And then as we kind of add those up, then we kind of give ourselves like a big one at the top of, if we can just get that, then all these other problems go away, or they're achievable. And it
Yeah.
gives us like obtainable things. Cause I hate saying like, oh, I got one big goal, but it's gonna take me 2 years to hit it. Like I want to have something like every quarter. I'm just thinking, if I get like January 1, we just get to April, here's where here's the goal. And then we get to April.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Here's the next one. And we kind of do it that way. It
Yeah.
seems to have really helped out.
Everything that you just went through is so simple, but yet so profound. Even within Gathering the Kings, I created what I call the King's Scroll. And I do this very similar to what you just talked about, basically allowing you to dream just a smidge. 5 years is far enough out to where it's a little bit of a dream, but it's not so far where it's like, okay, bro, we both know, looking back, you got a 10-year-old, I got a 9-year-old. It's like 5 years, they're going to be 15 here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So 5 years really isn't that far out, but it's far enough, to your point, where it's like, okay, let myself dream a little bit. But then we got to immediately go, okay, well, if that were to actually happen, what needs to be done in the next 12 months? And then, okay, so if that's going to happen, what needs to be done this quarter so that I can be on pace? And what I have found is that if you can create this pace for yourself, and basically what you just said is like, okay, I'm going to set this target, but in order to hit this, I got to reverse engineer the process back to, okay, so this quarter, which then, okay, well, what about this month? What about this week? What about today? And it gives us a pace. That way we know if we're on pace to hit the target. If we're not, then we pick up the pace. If we are, then it's good. We're making good decisions, or we have to make it an adjustment. We have to do a different type of deal, or we have to do 2 deals instead of 1, whatever the adjustments are. But you can't make adjustments if you're not laying these things out. So I just love the simplicity of what you're sharing there. I think it's applicable across all industry. You want to add anything before we move on?
No, I would just say it probably comes to the fire in me. We always call it, keeping it simple. And there's several different analogies that you can find out there about that. But I mean, that's the thing is, if it's not simple, I'm going to not follow it, or the staff isn't going to follow it. If we give them a bonus program and we make it so super complicated that they don't understand it, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. So we try to always keep things simple, and I think that's the big thing, is try not to overthink it.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, let's go to the speed round here. First question in the speed round is around tracking. And so you've got obviously several different, you kind of just mentioned it a few seconds ago, several different maybe divisions of this main real estate company that you have, but all tracking all of that together. If you could only pick one thing to track, maybe it's that high level goal that you were just kind of talking about. What would be the one thing that you would track if you could only pick one?
I mean, it's hard to, that's a hard one. I think ultimately though, like would be probably our budgeting, if you run out of money, then you got lots of problems, right? But the more money that you have coming in, then, the problems go away, whether it's salaries or benefits or buying another project or doing whatever, and so for us, one of the big things that my partner's great at, and that I've gotten good at on a high level is just the budgeting and accounting. And it's also become one of the cruxes where it has really slowed us down at times. We weren't able to figure that out rightly. So, because we outgrew, I think, 3 or 4 accounting groups that were doing bookkeeping and accounting. We just crushed them with our volume, and we just scaled faster than they could scale. And, you can do all these other amazing things, but if you don't know how much money you actually have in the bank, can you make payroll? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I've had to really learn that, right? Is I get all charged up with the vision and taking action and doing these different things. And then I've got a great partner, which is another successful part of strategic partnerships, but he is great at monitoring those things and making sure that we're, that we are successful, I guess. He keeps track of that stuff. And I think that that's the one big thing, if I had to take away from anything else, is, do we have more coming in than we have going out? And as long as that is, we're in the black, then we're doing good.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's, again, very simple, but you gave several little key things in there that make a big difference. I would say to the listener today, if they don't have an accounting group, step one, go make sure you have someone keeping track of your expenses and your income. That's called your P&L, your balance sheet, all that fun stuff. CPA can take care of that for you. But I love what you said there for maybe some of the more advanced listeners. It's okay that you move on past the accountant, whether it's been a buddy or a friend or someone associated in your church.
Or yourself.
Or yourself. Yeah, no.
Thank
you. Yes. You can't. It's interesting because the person keeping track of the money doesn't necessarily grow the business, but they will keep it limited. That's for sure.
Yeah. 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 And you may ask me this later, but I real quick want to throw in a book that changed my life. One of them I doing my first deal was Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. And I can't talk about that book enough when I talk to people, because understanding that, the things that you and I have talked about today, even with goal setting, you can't do that properly when you're stuck in the business. And, maybe you don't pay yourself for a year or two, or maybe you take very little from it, but you get the right people in place. That's the real way that you grow and you can expand and you can achieve the lifestyle that you want, or the life that you want, which is for you and I would be time freedom to have with our families and whatnot. And you just have to kind of let go. And that's why we use, that's a vendor that we use, a third party person does all of our payroll, our bookkeeping, accounting. And then we just monitor those things, and make sure that things are doing it regularly. But if I had to sit down and try to do it, or Tim did, we would never get anything else done, because it just, it takes up that set of eyes. And that's just one aspect of what we do. But
such a higher level opportunity for you guys to be able to push into if you're not doing those little things. I heard you say not pay yourself for a year or two. I think that's great. I think I missed the boat on that one. I think I went like 7 years. I think I just grind.
Well, yeah, I mean,
pouring it in. I missed the memo. I should have paid myself earlier.
Right. Well, but that, I mean, building anything, I mean, it takes, for us, we vertically integrated last year, and we joke because, the property man, some of the staff think that we're just, we're millionaire, billionaires, just crushing it. And we're like, no, you don't understand. Like the guy that's our groundskeeper over there, the guy making 15, 16 bucks an hour, like he made more than I did last year when it comes to this specific business, because we just are pouring everything back into the business for salaries, getting the right people in place and building that out. And so,
that's right.
There's definitely a time where that has to happen. So that's what I said. You need to have a plan. Don't just quit your job. If you're a W-2 person looking to get out, you just want to make sure you have a plan, understand what you're taking on.
Yeah. There's strategy in that, especially if you're going to be in real estate, being bankable and having a W-2. It seems so dumb, so stupid, really, but it's actually pretty strategic. It's funny. I had, just off of that story of your groundskeeper, I had a store manager. This was years ago. I probably had maybe 3 or 4 locations. I'm probably 26 or 27. And this manager at that time, he was probably making $15, $16, $17 an hour, something like that, 30, 35,000, something like that. And I can't remember exactly how the conversation had come up, but we had talked about me. I was like, hey, I'll switch you. Well, you take my salary, I'll take yours, And he was like, bet. And I go, whew, thank goodness I just got a raise. And he was so confused. I had to literally break it down to him. I'm like, bro, you don't even have a clue. I'm running around here twice as many hours. And that's okay, because eventually, like you said, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I knew why I was doing it. And although it was much longer than I had anticipated originally, I was willing to do it. And I'm thankful that I did it. But in those moments, man, it can get thin.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're, like I said, you go, look, if you're around other people and they're driving nice cars, they're living in these big houses, and you know what I mean? There's a lot of people out there that are, I would call them rich, or they like to showcase that they're rich, but you really don't know what's in their bank account. You really don't know like what that looks like. And so while you're grinding away, trying to be smart and build something, again, delaying that gratification, someday you'll get there. Someday you'll have that, but
Right.
it doesn't necessarily have to mean right now. And, I talked to a lot of young guys that want to get into what I'm doing or in business in general. And they just think that they, after 2 or 3 years, they should be able to do those things. And it's like, if you want to last in any form of business, I think, that's something that you have to delay. I mean, it's can it come? Yes, but if it comes too early or you push it too early, it's going to be your downfall.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely appreciate the book recommendation. That was going to be my next question. Who Not How is a phenomenal book. We'll put it in the show notes as well. And the folks can listen or click, purchase, whatever there. But yeah, phenomenal book, changed a lot of things for me as well. I've got one small question, then we're going to end with my last question here. We've talked a lot about, getting around other entrepreneurs, masterminding, networking. Usually my question is, what do you think about it? You've given us plenty about what you think about it. What would you suggest to the listener today who has never done anything like that? What would you say a good action step for them would be?
Oh man, I mean, my primary thing is real estate, but if you're in any business, it would just be Google, like, or look up like what's in your area. I think that
Yeah.
there's something to be said about congregating with other folks that are in the industry that you're in or you want to be in. And, there's a lot of like we do stuff through Firehouse Bros. That's our education brand. And I mean, we basically teach people like, hey, here's what I wish I would have known in my first couple apartment deals. But it's also created a community where people can get in that they want to get into real estate, but they don't know. Maybe they don't have a local meetup. They can get in and be around some other high level players. And it doesn't matter if you're, multimillionaire, you know, $50 million of assets under management, or you own that many, or, you're buying your first 10 houses or 5 houses or your first house, being around other people is super important. And, if as far as like business owners, like I said, I would strategically track down the people that are in your local area that are doing what you want to be doing. If you're trying to open a franchise, like go find somebody else, go track down the franchise owners in your area. And maybe, if you're opening up a Subway, maybe you don't go track down the other Subway owner, right? They may, I wouldn't feel like competition because there's enough mouths to feed that,
100%. Yep.
but there are people out there that are like, "Heck no, get away from me. Like, I'm not gonna teach
Yeah.
you, what I'm doing." But if no matter what it is, anybody that's doing that, I think that, getting in rooms of people like that, and if there isn't one, like, create one. Maybe you're the first person in your area that realizes that there's a need for this, or you're looking for that, and then start advertising it. Maybe you start with one person, maybe you start with two people, whatever. But that environment to me has been life changing. And, you know, entrepreneurship can be like an island. I can't go talk to the guy across the street from me who works for a bank about what I do, or the neighbor to the left of me or the right of me. And the only people that understand my headaches or my struggles or my frustrations are talking to you, talking to other people, your listeners, and getting in other rooms of people that are doing the same thing, or something similar, than what I'm doing. I can go talk to a business owner, it doesn't have to be a real estate person. And we
Right.
all kind of have been through the same struggles. And I really feel like it just re-energizes you, recharges your battery, and it helps you to kind of keep dredging through some of those struggles. So that's what
100%, man. I couldn't agree more. And I think it took me too long to figure that one out. Took me a long time to figure out a lot of things, but that one specifically took me too long. Last question here for you, Seth. I want to know if you had the opportunity to whisper in the younger Seth's ear, what would you say?
Oh, I would probably try to get them to understand assets and liabilities, taking, rather than working for somebody else for 22 years, even though I love the job, is like you can work for yourself. And even though, again, 22 years ago, there weren't masterminds, there wasn't
Right.
social media, there wasn't all the connection that you can have with people throughout the country. So it was different. But I mean, that's what I would try to get them to understand is that, all I ever knew was the value of my time because somebody else told me that that's what it was worth. And I would probably tell my younger self, like, look, that's a false story. You don't, your time is not worth 17 bucks an hour. It's actually worth 250 bucks an hour or 500 bucks an hour or whatever it is, but you just don't know any better. And, we can go down the whole rabbit hole of my parents and blue collar and how they grew up and what you're trained and what you're learned and taught about money and all of that different stuff. But I would, that I think is the big thing for me is that you're worth more than maybe what you think you are. That's what I'd probably tell myself.
Yeah. Yeah, changing the time or even not even charging per time, right? Like not associating your value directly with time, but more so with result or value, I think is even another
Yeah.
clear way to say that as well. So Seth, you've been incredible. How can the listener find you? Maybe they want to reach out, they want to learn about real estate. Maybe they're a firefighter. They're like, dude, this is my guy. How can they connect with you?
Yeah. So we have two websites, the streamgroups.com. It's plural, streamgroups.com. If you're interested in investing, getting into bigger apartment complex deals, we do syndications. So we do that. And then, if it's somebody that wants to get into our network or our circle, the firehousebros.com will take you to our group. And like I said, we're all entrepreneurs, real estate business owners, whatever. And it's a lot of it's firemen, but there's a ton of other people that aren't firemen that are in there. They can find me that way, or they can check me out on all social media platforms. So I'm on Facebook, which is under Seth Teagle. I'm on Instagram, Seth Teagle, and I think we're on TikTok now as well. So yeah,
Making his way.
I'm an old guy getting in line with some stuff, right? When I was a fireman, everybody was anti social media, and so I was very, very not active. But as I've gotten out and branched out and realized that I need to be putting more things out there, we're all in, so we're putting stuff out regularly. So you can find us on any of those platforms.
That's awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes as well. We just so appreciate you being here. You've been incredible. Great insights, great energy, man. Selfishly, I'm glad that I've had a chance to meet you, and wish nothing but blessing on your business, your team that you've been building, your children that we got to talk about, all of that. We just thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you to the listeners too.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.